This is our first granddaughter. And one thing's a little unusual is that April was a part of the birth process, and this was not viewed as normal by those who were attending the birth. And one of the things that would be really helpful for everyone to think through, and just as we're processing too as a family, when you're building a multi-generational family, I think that this could and maybe ought to look different, particularly the way that the mother matriarch, grandmother functions within the family. So we've got 4 daughters, and April's been really diligently trying to figure out how to do this, because this is going to be a big part of our lives, God willing. So Kelsey, why don't you start and tell that part of the story?
Sure. Mom was at my first birth with Elijah. And the way that came about was Matthew, my husband, and I, we were just talking about who we wanted at the birth. We were taking a birth class. Both births were in the hospital. And I had to tell them who I wanted in the room with me. So obviously, I wrote his name down, and he was like, "Is there anyone else that you'd want?" And I was like, "Well, I want my mom there." And he was like, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Yeah." I feel like I didn't think too much about it. And then I asked mom, and I feel like you got emotional, but I was just asking. And I didn't really think that that was like a huge deal. It was just like, well, you're my mom. So yeah. And so she was there for the whole like 30 hours, super long induction process. And that story is very different than this story. Then when I got pregnant again, I asked Matthew, I was like, "Are you okay if my mom comes again?" He was like, "Yeah, that was great." So we just asked her again, and honestly didn't think too deeply about it. But the two of us had learned and like talked a lot about after Elijah's birth and during my pregnancy with Penny about like what birth's supposed to look like, and like historically what it was like and what it's turned into now and things like that. So it was just kind of like an ongoing conversation between mom and I feel like the whole pregnancy. And part of that, what came out of it was her wanting to take a doula course. And I remember when you told me that you signed up for a doula course, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because I had kind of been going back and forth about like everyone said like you should have a doula if you're going to the hospital because like they can help advocate for you and like all these things. But they're like expensive, and they're not usually like covered by any type of insurance or whatever. And so I was like, I don't know if I can hire one. And we kind of interviewed one last time and didn't really click with her. And so I was just kind of intimidated by the whole like interviewing process. Like we want a stranger there. I don't know. So when you told me that you want to take a doula course, I was like, that makes so much more sense. Cause I mean, odds are you'll probably be at more births, at least more of mine, and then maybe some of the other sisters and stuff. We'll see. I got really excited about that. And then you took the course, and we're like talking about it the whole time and really into it. And a lot of it was like this like bag of tricks that you bring along with you and things like that. And so if like fast forward to the actual hospital, we had this nurse, her name was Jody. Shout out to Jody at CME. And she was awesome. I really liked her in labor and delivery. And somewhere in the after Penny was born, in like the golden hour time where they're letting the baby just sit on mom's chest for a little bit, Jody was there going over like some paperwork and stuff. And there was some comment about how long I was in labor for. And I was like, well, it was like active labor for probably like 10 hours, but I've had like 4 days of like what I would call pre-labor, like kept thinking he was going to start and then it would go away and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of gestured over to mom, and I was like, well, I mean, she labored for 5 days with me. So, I kind of, it was like payback, like making a joke or something. And she kind of looked between the two of us and was like, wait, you're the mom? And we were like, yeah, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I'm the grandma, I'm the mom. And the nurse was like, wait, I thought you were the doula. Are you the doula? And like, yeah, well, she's kind of both, like, trying to explain. And she was so shocked, and she just kept looking back and forth between the two of us, like, what? Wait, you're what? And like during the whole like labor time, she never picked up on the fact that you were my mom. And what the comment that she made was, you have such good boundaries. And she kind of talked about how, like, usually when the mom's in the room, the nurse has to, like, the mom is like a whole person that she needs to, like, manage and take care of and make sure she's, like, kept busy and not freaking out and whatever. And she didn't have to do that this time, and thought that mom was actually really helpful. And so I think she was just really surprised by that. And so we just came away from that kind of processing like, oh, like if a daughter felt comfortable enough to ask her mom to come with her, it still might not be a positive experience um, during the labor process. And so I don't know, we've just been kind of processing that a little bit since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. Having a nurse that maybe has seen hundreds of these and never seen anything like this. And I'm sure people listening to this are like, I would never want my mom. She's the last person I'd want while I'm actually, in active labor.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate. It seems like there is something natural about this connection as opposed to like really unusual, but it is unusual, like in our culture. And so, yeah, I'd love April for you to reflect on what do you think? Yeah, tell us kind of like what brought you to want to do this, and how have you thought about this kind of from the big picture perspective
Mhm.
about a mother, matriarch and her daughter.
Well, I think it was interesting that the way the nurse worded it, saying, "You have such good boundaries. You have such good boundaries." She couldn't believe my boundaries. And I, was kind of like, okay. After, and she even said something like, "You two must get along really well, or you must have a good relationship," or something like that. And so I just was reflecting on that a lot in the days hence. And I think that what she was labeling good boundaries, I would call like an understanding of roles.
Yeah.
And I know that we've tried to throw that out, the idea of roles in a lot of modern society. But I think that I believe very strongly that my son-in-law is the head of Kelsey now, and that this birthing process is for them to experience together. And that although it's a massive privilege for me to get to be a part of it, it's not about me. And so I am there to help Kelsey and support her, um, much as I have throughout her whole life. Since I was pregnant with her, it's been my goal to help Kelsey succeed and do things well. And in that context, I felt like I understood what my role was. I was mother to the birthing woman. And so and then I think my understanding of what that role was very much a support role and what needs to be done. And, um, it's about her, not about me. And it's about getting this baby into this world safely. And it's about how can I not get in the way of Kelsey and Matt's relationship during this process. But also, it's kind of bonding between him and I as well, because we're working together to get this massive job accomplished,
Yeah.
of support Kelsey in the time of her most vulnerable time
Yeah.
in her life is when she's in labor. And how can I step into that role of making sure she's okay? So it doesn't matter if I'm uncomfortable holding my body in a position to, reach around to her back and make sure that I'm rubbing that one spot she wants in her back while Matt's doing this thing over here. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm getting wet in the shower or those things. It's like, what is happening to Kelsey? What does she need? What position is she in? All those things. Um, it just comes from like the instant Kelsey was born. It's like, what does she need? How do I take care of her? How do I make that happen? And when she said, "You guys must get along really well or have a good relationship or something," I was also reflecting on that, and I was like, "Well, that's hard won. That's a hard we fought for our relationship, and we worked really hard through the years to, um, overcome any hurdles that were in the way of us having, um, a good relationship." And so I feel like, to me, getting to be in a birth of a daughter is like a huge, um, fruit of years of hard work,
Yeah.
relationally and self-sacrifice along the way. It was a huge, like,
Yes.
uh, epic experience to get to be a part of.